The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Jacob Black, Director of Marketing here over at One Resource Group. I appreciate you all hopping on the call today. Today's call is going to be very fun, very interesting, very informative. We have our good partner, Eric Johnson, over at Allianz. He's going to share some of the updates and new features, enhancements of the new Allianz Life Accumulator. I think you'll take a lot away from this webinar. Housekeeping items are that we'll answer questions towards the end of the webinar. Feel free to ask them throughout. We'll make sure they get addressed, and if not, we'll have your life marketer over here at ORG reach out to you to make sure we get it taken care of. But with that being said, Eric, I'm going to let you take it away, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Yeah, it's exciting times. We have a quote new product, if you will, or enhanced product for the first time in quite a while. So gives me something to talk about besides just the typical. So that's always fun. So we'll get right into it. First things first, what has changed? We got a new product name. Right out of the gates. So we changed, we are no longer doing the Life Pro Plus name. We are retiring that after 13 great years. And now it is just going to be called the Allianz Life Accumulator, IUL. We also dropped the F on FIUL, so now it's just an IUL. So big changes there, but yeah, realistically what's really happening is, as you can see here on that second point, pricing adjustments. That was a big thing that they took into account just from the feedback that we've been hearing from the field. That made some pretty dramatic changes on the premium loads, mainly when you're doing like a 1035 exchange, and I'll show you what those changes look like. But that was one of the biggest things that they really focused on with this new product, is making sure you and the client kind of getting more bang for your buck, right? We had a pretty large premium load when it came to 1035 exchanges, and Allianz dug pretty deep and made a dramatic change, which is really great to see. And we'll actually run we'll do a case study here towards the end, and we'll show a side-by-side comparison of the old product with the new product with the 1035 exchange. You guys can see the difference between the old and the new. Target premiums at older ages, they did do a slight decrease on that. So anyone over about 60 plus, they did do a slight change there, more to get within the, I could say within the field. It's about a 5 to 7% drop depending on the case size for 60 plus year olds. On a typical, 45, 50-year-old, there's no real changes there when it comes to those target premiums. They did increase the classic bonus. On the old product, that was a 0.9% floor. And they actually increased that to a full 1%. So now if you do run any index within that classic option, you will have a 1% guaranteed floor. And that's also just an additional 1% if there is any positive growth in the index for that year. And then they did increase that premium deposit fund rider to 6%. So now any large monies that clients want to give you and they don't want to have to do annual premiums, that we will slow drip into those for you anywhere from 3 to 10 years. While it sits with us, it will make 6%. We did add 3 new index options, which I will touch on here in a little bit. One of the most exciting ones I would say is this S&P Futures Index. People really wanted to see a lockable S&P, and now we have it. So that's really exciting. They did change the Bloomberg ER index. Kind of the feedback on that was that it always seemed to be lagging, and so they really boosted up the equity portion of that index. And then they did do new with a blended index as well. One exciting thing to note, because some of the rumors you guys might have been hearing was that risk class upgrade would go away when the new product is released, and that is not true. That risk class upgrade program is still here. It should be here at least through Q3, most likely probably through the end of the year at a minimum. And so that was really exciting news that they kept that program in force. So, for those that are unfamiliar, any case you submit with us, if it comes back at a true standard or preferred rating, will be issued at preferred best. And if it's a true tobacco standard rating, that'll be issued at preferred tobacco. And just, to clarify what is a true standard means, it can't come back at a table 3 and then we use lifestyle credits to get it to standard and then bump it up to preferred plus. It has to come back at a true standard. Can't be any table rating, can't be any table shaving to get up to standard. True standard or preferred, that will get issued at preferred best. So looking at the premium changes with the premium loads, this is one of the most exciting things, I think. On the old product, for any premium coming in years 1 through 9, you're getting charged 8%. And then years 10 plus, it was 4% for any premium coming in. But any, a 1035 exchange, right? So we had a 1035, that portion, that cash value coming over on the old product was getting hit with a 14% premium load. And so, big feedback on that was like, hey, that's really high. Obviously, it still works from an illustration standpoint, but when the client finds out what they're getting hit for that 1035, it really turns them off to the product. And so Allianz said, we hear you, and what they changed it to now is a 9%. So when you do a 1035 exchange, it is 9%. So they dropped it by 5%. Regular premium coming in year 1 is still not, it's 9% versus the 8%. But years 2 on, it's 5%, right? And so you're really going to see some ground made up in those 1 through 9 years where you're getting charged on the previous product 8, now it's 5. And so Allianz really kind of, dug down and really made I would say the expenses associated with this product much better and much more in line with, maybe what you're seeing with other carriers on a 1035 exchange. So that was one of the big things that they really focused on and changed. Like I mentioned, they did this and they still didn't change those target premiums, obviously outside of that 60 plus. So that way you as the agent are still making your money too. Yeah. So with that being said, let's look at, what really has changed, what's going on. And so far, guys, I can tell you the feedback on the new product has been pretty substantial. The biggest thing with that target premium on 60 plus, like I said, it's about 5 to 7% decrease, depending on the right size of the case. That now you get that full 1% bonus versus that 0.9. The max illustrated rate did decrease just slightly to 6.72, but obviously if you take into account now that full 1% bonus, it actually will look better. And then that premium deposit fund rider increased to 6%. It's pretty powerful. Another thing that they added when it comes to the rate lock feature, I know most of you probably are familiar with this, where at any point in time during your crediting period, you can lock in your gains as you see fit. Allianz took that one step further now and said now you can actually lock on both the upper or lower targets. So what does that mean? If you have a policy that is in force right now and you are at a 10% rate of return and you have an upper auto lock set at 12, you can actually now go in and say, hey, if it drops to 8, I want it to auto lock. So now essentially you are covering the bottom and the top, right? So now you're not going to get less than an 8, and you could also get a 12. So essentially you are increasing your floor. And so that is available, as of today, and that's also available with all in-force policies. So if you have existing clients, you have existing policies that have the rate lock feature, that lower threshold lock feature is available to those policies today. And so they have that access. So it might be worth making those phone calls, talking to your clients and saying, hey, you have a nice positive gain so far. Your auto lock has not quite been initiated. Let's maybe increase that floor. Right now it's at a 0.9% or 0. Maybe we up that to 3 or 4 or 5%. So now we know no matter what happens with the Fed and the economy, you're going to get a 5% rate of return. And so that's been a really powerful feature. They also increased the rate lock on more indexes, which is really cool. So just a quick summary, here are the new index options, right? So they came out with the S&P 500 Futures Index, tracks a 3-month S&P 500 futures. There is 0 bond component, so this is straight equities. And this does have a rate lock feature on it, and it is uncapped on the upside. Now, a big question we get is, how does this perform versus the regular S&P 500? And I'll show you what that looks like on a side-by-side comparison. The Bloomberg index that I mentioned that they changed, getting more of that equity component. You can see there it's now 80% large cap, 10% small, and 10% tech. And so they literally got rid of the bond component of the Bloomberg. And that, I would say the bond quote unquote component is actually going to cash. And so if volatility gets crazy, which obviously the markets this week have been insane, there is a portion that they could take and put that into cash. And then the blended, as you can see there, what that is made up of, you got 40% bond component, and then the equity has changed where they are using that S&P futures. You got some small caps, and you do have some international exposure there as well. So those are the big changes. And like I mentioned, all of these three new indexes that you see on the screen are all lockable with the upper target and having that feature of the lower target rate lock as well. Like I mentioned, I would really highly recommend. We've actually had a few people say they've gone in and they've actually started to add that lower threshold lock to existing policies. So here's that side-by-side comparison between the S&P and what, comparing exactly the one that we have with that 12.5% cap versus the new one. And just so you guys know, that S&P with the 12.5% cap is still available. We did not get rid of that index. That is still there. But you can see that side-by-side comparison, when the market takes off, because that's always been the biggest thing with the Bloomberg or the PIMCO. It's like, hey, the market's up 20. Why is the PIMCO only up 5? Or why is the Bloomberg at 3? Right? And so now you can tell them, hey, there is an index option out there now that will ride with the S&P. And so if the S&P is up 30, there's a pretty high likelihood you're going to be right there at 25, 26, 27, 28%. Right? It's uncapped on the upside, so you get that full rate of return. And the nice part is when a client goes into that index, right, they know the S&P, they understand it. They're not going to call you and say, hey, why is my index only at 4 or 5%? Right? Because they know what the market's doing. They know they have a floor with this product. The S&P's at -10, they're going to call you and say, thank you for putting me in this product because I just got a 0 instead of -10. Or if the S&P's up 20, they're not going to call you and go, why am I only up 4? Because you'll be participating right there with it and be right at 18, 19, or 20%. And so it really takes away that, why is it not doing X when the market's doing X, right? Now you have that ability to say, hey, you can put it into this, and if the market performs, you'll be happy. If it doesn't, you'll be happy. They're not going to call you and question why is it not doing what it's doing, because they understand what the S&P is. But you can see here it goes, hand in hand. And obviously with the futures index being uncapped, if you were to be in that versus the one that's capped at 12.5 over the long run, you would have made out better. Right? You can see there at the bottom, your average was just over 11, while the S&P with the cap was at 8. And so we have seen tremendous inflow of new business being placed with, at least a percentage of this going into that new index, because they love having the rate lock, they love the uncapped, and they like that rate lock on the lower threshold as well. Looking at the Bloomberg, you can see here pretty close. Obviously at certain times, one's going to outperform the other. They got the same par rate, which is great. But just nice comparison to see what would it have done versus something else, right? And the big thing that I like to look at here is, a lot of conversations we were having, this year is based on last year's returns. You can see that right there, right? The Bloomberg did 5. Well, if you were in the new one that they just rolled out, you would have actually, almost tripled that rate of return. And so you can see then why they had to do what they did. Now the blended, right, kind of the same thing, but you can see here much better, right? People love this blended index. Obviously, the big thing is diversify, and that's what this does. You can see with this new one, much better performance, right? Much, much better performance. And like I mentioned, guys, all 3 of these new indexes that I just mentioned, all lockable in the upper threshold and lower threshold. So here now is the lineup, right? So you can see the only thing that is not lockable now within Allianz is that typical S&P 500 that's capped at 12.5%. That's the only thing that is not lockable. Everything else, your client gets that ability at any point in time to lock in profits as they see fit, right? And the nice thing is, as most of you know, if you're in one of these indexes or if you're in all 4, you can lock in each one separately, right? You don't have to hit the lock button and then they all lock at the same time. And they all come in that classic with that 1% now floor, the select, which is that 40% multiplier, and the bonus, which is that 15% multiplier. So all of the new indexes come in those different categories. So if you have clients that are very aggressive, they can go into the select. If you say, hey, I love having a 1% floor, perfect, the classic's available to them. Big thing we get is kind of when to choose what, right? What, I'm sure you guys get asked this question all the time. Well, what index should I go into? Or what should I do? When should I lock? What, you tell me what's best. And the nice thing with this is just saying, hey, you can talk to your client, say, you tell me based on these options what makes you most comfortable. And the nice thing is you can do percentage into each one of them, or they can go all in on the S&P because they think it's going to be a bull market. And then they can say, hey, next year, you know what, I think it might be a little more bearish or bullish or whatever it may be, or flat. Perfect. You can change every year, right? You have 21 days from your anniversary to go on and make changes. And so this is a really nice slide. We've had some great feedback of people sitting down with clients and saying, I presented it, saying, here are the options, here's why you would choose X, Y, or Z, and the feedback has been tremendous. So if you guys want a copy of this or get a hold of this type of marketing piece where it really kind of lays out based on how you feel about the market, based on where you think the market's going, here is the best quote unquote allocation accordingly, we can get you that kind of information. So now what you guys are probably going to see if you go into WinFlex or even on our software, when you go to run illustrations, it's going to make essentially a kind of a bag of indexes for you when you go to actually choose the allocations, right? You got the first three that you see there on the left with the conservative, the moderate, and aggressive. Then you also have the fixed breakdown as well. And so essentially, it is the same percentage breakdown. It's just going between the classic, the bonus, and the select. Right? Because obviously if you have a client that says, I'm very aggressive, I think, I got a zero floor, these things are going to do great. You want to get the select. I mean, mathematically speaking, that is the most bang for your buck, right? Because you get a positive rate of return, you add on that 40% multiplier, you're off to the races. And so you'll see in there that there's already pre-made, right, buckets made for you guys to choose from between conservative, moderate, or aggressive. And this is just nice to know is what is it that I am choosing if I go with that route. Now, I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of people go in and manually change it to do, hey, I want to do 50% in that futures index because I love that. And then they might do a 25-25 split between the new Bloomberg and PIMCO, or they might do throw a percentage into blended, or they might do like a 90% S&P and 10% into the fixed, right? Because that fixed rate of return is strong. And so it's just nice for you guys to know when you go into WinFlex, you're not going, what the heck is a conservative strategy? Now you know it's made up of that 25% in the futures, the blended, the BUD-B, and the PIMCO. And it's just based on if you're in the classic, the bonus, or the select option. You can easily go in there and manually change it to whatever you like. We are definitely seeing more and more people start to put more into that S&P 500 futures just because, number one, if the market goes crazy, you're going to ride the wave with it because it's uncapped, it's lockable. But number two, it really just takes that headache out of the, hey, why is this not performing when the market is, right? Because that'll go hand in hand. So we want to look at that case study, right? I mentioned we're going to do I want to look at a 1035 between the old and the new, right? This is a big question we get asked is, how does it compare side by side? Because just so you guys are aware, if you have an existing policy that is pending with us and it was submitted prior to July 17th, you can choose which product to go into, right? If your client says, hey, I love the old product, I just want to stay in it, perfect, no problem, they can stay in that. Or if they want to go, hey, I like the new product, not a problem, they can go into that too. So you get to choose by the end of the year, as long as it has been pending with us pre-July 17th. So we look at a side-by-side comparison of a 1035 exchange. We've got a 51-year-old looking for obviously a few different things, but the design is we're going to run at Preferred Plus. And why is that? Well, because we have that underwriting risk class upgrade. We're going to do $150K in a 1035 exchange. Then we're going to do $300,000 a year for 5 years. And we're going to show loans starting in year 20 to age 90. So that's 71, so age 71 to 90. we'll see what that would look like. So you can see here on the screen, you got the old product, the Life Pro Plus versus the Accumulator. So you got your initial death benefit, hair is different. Premium stays the same, obviously. The 1035 exchange is the same. Year one cash value is already $6,000 higher, just with the new product. Your loans are $16,000 higher per year, right? That's not just total, that is per.
Hey, Eric, I think we lost you there. Let me know if you can hear me.
Decide which product to go in. They always want to show, hey, can we run it in the old and run it in the new illustration and do a side-by-side comparison? And I can tell you, I just had a really nice case. We had one going for us. It was a $30 million death benefit. And it was submitted pre-new product. And then they ran a side-by-side comparison and ended up switching to the new product, right? The target actually was a little higher, the target premium. So the agent made a little more. And the distributions were a little bit higher at the end of it. And so they made the decision to go into the new product. Plus, they loved having that ability to lock on the if you do want to change it, it is not a bunch of new paperwork. You don't have to submit a brand new app. It is just a form that gets sent out with delivery requirements saying, hey, client, you are acknowledging that you are going into the new product. So that's a big question we get. It's like, do I have to go through underwriting again, all this and that? And the answer is no. Right? It's just, one form you need to sign, just, stating that they are aware that they're going into the Accumulator versus the Life Pro Plus. Sales tools, most of you guys are probably aware of most of these. One of the things that we really like to, I would say talk about is that Insight tool. That's been extremely helpful with clients and people understanding, because obviously some people get a little, where and they're like, well, the fees in these policies are so crazy and it makes no sense. But when you actually break it down and look at it, over the life of the policy, it ends up being, it's like 0.9% is the fees, which is less than, you would charge for assets under management. So that's been a really nice tool. And we've got a lot of great tools now within that we can send you guys and customize things and do different things. We've seen a lot of, I would say, requests of showing it that, because they can do a really nice sales presentation, etc. So between that, and I would say that backcasting tool is really nice. They're just saying, hey, how would these indexes have performed if my policy were to go in force, 20 years ago? How has it performed? Or what's the likelihood of hitting, these numbers that you're showing me on this illustration, right? That's what a lot of people want to know, is how likely is it that I'm going to get 6%, right, each and every year? And the answer is obviously you're not going to get 6% every single year. You're going to have some great years, you're going to have some down years. The nice thing is your down year could be a positive 1% or a 0. And so it's just nice to have that tool where you can actually walk through, different hypothetical situations with your clients, and you can run certain things where your client can tell you how they feel about the market, and it'll kick out, what you should currently go into as an index. Marketing pieces, these have all been updated with the new product now. So if you guys need anything, you want to sit down with clients, you just want to study up and make sure you're understanding everything, we have all new, updated marketing materials that both for the financial professional and the consumer as well. So just let us know if you want any of those. We get those over to you right away. I would say that, the big thing is that the diversified strategies, that's been a really one that people really like to see, and, that really hits with the consumer, because, they always hear about diversification, how important it is, and to have that piece available really walks through what it is, what are you going into, really gives the client a lot of comfort knowing that. But with that, guys, here's just the quick rules, just so you guys can see it. Obviously, you guys know this, but like I said, December 31st, if you do have existing policies that are pending, you have all the way till the end of the year to make the decision on which one to go into. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions. I think we said we'll wait for questions till the end, but yeah, thank you guys. Like I said, it's a new product. It's still an IUL. It's still the only product we have. It's just been enhanced pretty tremendously, I would say, with those new indexes, especially that S&P uncapped with the rate lock on the top and the bottom. But with that, love to open it up to questions. The loans, forgot to mention this, the loans are not changing, right? Our loans, when you actually take money out, those have not changed at all. The guarantees have not changed at all when it comes to those things. But with that, if there's any questions, love to take them. Otherwise, guys, I really appreciate the time hopping on and understanding about the product.
Yeah, great job, Eric. And we have a few questions here. We're running short on time, so we'll get to a few of them. First question here, the agent is asking, how does this product stack up against other accumulation products in the market?
Well, it depends on what we're trying to accomplish. So when it comes to, building up cash value, accessing cash value, I'd put us probably at the top. Being that it's our only product in the life space, we better do it well. It's all we do is cash accumulation. So when we run benchmarks with other IUL carriers out there, we're usually at the top when it comes to cash coming out or cash available, so cash value, what you can take out in distributions and target premium. We are usually, I've never seen us below number 3.
Perfect. Looks like another question here. The agent is asking if we had a client get the Life Pro Plus at Q1 of this year, are they eligible to convert to the new product?
So is it in force?
I believe so.
In force? No, you can't just do a change, unfortunately, especially in Q1. Obviously, if it was in the 30-day free look period, they could. But if it's been in force for a couple months, yeah, you can't just do an exchange, unfortunately.
Cool.
But the nice thing is, the features, the rate lock on the bottom's already available to them, and then they are looking at adding like that S&P futures index and those new indexes to existing in force policies.
Right. A few more questions here I'll try and get to. Like I said, run short on time. Will a recording of this be sent out? Yes, it will. Look for that email tomorrow. Another question, can we get this PowerPoint? Yeah, Eric, if you could send me any marketing material I have or PowerPoint,
Absolutely.
that way we can send that out as well. Again, another question here is pretty much asking, why would you pick one index over the other, or do you recommend blending the 3 indexes? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the agent and the client and their preference, right? It really just comes down to what are they comfortable with, what do they understand. Most people understand the S&P 500, right? When you say S&P, most consumers and clients will be like, yeah, I know what that is. And so that's always nice to have that option, because then there's no awkward conversations if the Bloomberg volatility controlled index is not performing when the S&P is, right? It really just kind of helps make it, I would say it simplifies things, right? To be like, hey, we have an S&P uncapped index. They're like, great, makes sense, perfect. But those savvy investors, some of them really love those volatility controlled indexes because it goes between equities and bonds, which is great, right? When markets are going up and down like crazy. And so it's really just going through, showing them those marketing pieces, understanding the allocation options, just saying, what are you comfortable with, right? It's really just making sure that consumer understands what they're in, so that way they're not calling you in a year from now going, what the heck am I in? What is this? Why is it not performing?
Right. No, absolutely. And last piece here real quick. The agent that was asking about the client that got the policy in Q1, he did confirm that the policy is in force. Any recommendations or easy steps they should take to make the switch?
Well, making a switch will be, they can't really just switch it. The nice thing is, from what we're hearing, is that there is pretty high likelihood that they're going to get a lot of these features I mentioned to existing policies, and they already have the rate lock on the bottom now. Right. So they already have that feature.
No, it's perfect, man. Well, hey, I know we have 4 or 5 more questions left here. Looks like it's 2:31. Make sure your life rep here at ORIG reaches out to you, get any questions you need answered. But I mean, in the meantime, Eric, anything you want to leave us on? Appreciate you hopping on, man.
No, I would just say now's the time, guys, to really look at, an IUL, right? Taxes are going up, the market's kind of up and down. It's nice having that third lever to pull on that's protected on the downside with
Absolutely.
uncapped on the upside. So it's kind of a
Absolutely.
win-win.
Well, hey, we appreciate the partnership, the relationship, man. It's been a blast, and I appreciate you hopping on. For those of you that are still on the webinar, thank you for viewing, and stay tuned for our webinar next Wednesday at 2 p.m. That being said, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.